It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Vince Moffitt, owner and CEO of Basin Health and Hospice Companies. As a CEO of a large healthcare company, retired Battalion Chief from the Farmington, New Mexico Fire Department, and Incident Management Chief with Team Rubicon Rescue, Vince has over 30 years of crisis leadership, emergency disaster response, and instructional experience. He has been responding to and teaching fire rescue and EMS since 1991. The Basin Health Companies include several businesses specializing in home health care, from skilled care to homemakers, leadership, disaster, and emergency response are Vince's passions and believes in constantly developing and growing as a leader. A perpetual student, Vince is a board member of the Farmington Chamber of Commerce, Basin Good Neighbor Foundation, San Juan United Way, and the New Mexico Association of Home and Hospice Care. He's a Farmington, New Mexico native and has raised his 3 children, Natasha, Sheala, and Asa, in his beautiful community. Vince Moffitt, welcome into the corner office.
Thanks, Brant. It's really good to be here with you.
Great to have you here. I know we had to reschedule once or twice, but great to catch you today. What part of the planet are you on this fine day?
I'm actually sitting in my office in beautiful Farmington, New Mexico, up in the four corners of the U.S. We're in a beautiful part of the country, and it's a nice, cool day. We had some fresh snow, so it's a great day to be here.
The season's changing already, so we got a little snow on the ground. What's the temperature outside?
You know, it's actually warming up. I think we're about 40 degrees today, but hopefully it's staying cold on the mountain because we need to get out there and shred a little bit this season.
There we go. Sounds great. Well, listen, we always like to start with the early years. Where did you grow up? And tell us a little bit about your early family life, Vince.
You know, I really have a kind of a unique story for that. I'm sure you've heard a lot of unique stories, but, I was born here in Farmington, New Mexico, and had a sibling, a sister who was 2 years younger. And when I was in third grade, my dad had gotten involved in a tax protesting movement and decided that we were going to move to Alaska to live off the land.
Wow.
So they had several other families. We loaded up, sold everything we owned, and moved to Alaska, and the adventure began. We lived up there for a while and tried to make a go at it, and did things like, odd jobs and gold. They even panned for gold for a while and tried to make that work. And it was an adventure. I loved it. And then we ended up back into the desert in Tonopah, Arizona. Lived there for about a year. Eventually settled in Colorado again. And I went to high school in Colorado Springs, Colorado, the Air Force Academy. And during my senior year, my parents moved back to Farmington. We had family here. And not knowing what I wanted to do with my life at that point, and I'm sure we'll dig in deeper, I eventually came back and put down roots here. And it's been really good for me and my family. I really love this area of the world.
Been there ever since. What ages were you up in Alaska?
So I was up there, we only stayed for probably about 4 to 6 months. So I was in third grade, but I have vivid memories of that. I mean, thankfully, I do have memories because it was like the Wild West. I can remember, chasing wild animals around, playing outside at 2 a.m. with the sun, and fishing for salmon that were bigger than I was. It was amazing.
Was your dad an entrepreneur? Did he have a corporate job before you went up there? It sounds like he's a bit of a free spirit.
Yeah, he was. And he's part of my story for sure growing up, as I think everybody's fathers are. But, he was a union electrician.
Mm.
And so, even, you know, we moved a lot. A lot of people asked me if I was in the military, and really it had a lot to do with him chasing work around the country. And, we had several different locations through that story. I kind of summarized it a little bit, but yeah, he did that for years. And then he actually started the business that I own today.
Oh.
And my mom was a nurse and they had moved to Texas. And he was working in the oil field and she was working as a home health and hospice nurse. And they wanted to come back to town because their parents all lived here and we love this area of the country. And so they ended up coming back and starting the Basin Health Companies with my mom, my dad. My ex-wife was a CNA for him. My mom was a nurse. My dad did administrative work, and they had a receptionist. And he definitely has a gift when it comes to managing people, and just his people skills were amazing, and he excelled. It was an opportunity for him to really get and find his niche, and inspired me a great deal in some of the other things I did before coming into this business.
When you think about those childhood years, what were some of the fondest memories you had of dad and maybe some of the lessons you learned at that time?
I was telling somebody today, we were talking about my dad a little bit, and he was definitely, now he's the most kind, gentleman man I've ever met in my life. But growing up, he was hard. His expectations were hard. He definitely wanted me to work. I tell jokes all the time about how he'd have me dig ditches, and then after I tell him I was done, he'd have me go fill them back in. And it
Straight
maybe
out of the
didn't,
movie.
yeah, it maybe didn't work exactly like that, but he definitely really created a strong work ethic in me, and making sure that I was disciplined and was doing things to develop skills that obviously came later on in life. But he was a man of integrity. He had strong ethics. He definitely was passionate about what he believed in, and he stood by his convictions, and that's definitely something that played a strong role into my development growing up.
Sounds like mom was kind of the first entry into the home health care hospice area. What do you remember about her? What were kind of lessons that you picked up as a child from mom?
She, growing up, she was she stayed at home. And
Yeah.
in fact, she didn't work. I kind of think about when people say that, they can't make it with it unless they have two incomes in their family. But we did not have a whole lot growing up. We weren't necessarily poor, but there was times where we definitely ate beans and potatoes for a few days while we were waiting for something to come in. But, she was definitely the homemaker, and really a kind individual. And same thing, when she became a nurse, it was just something that just suited her personality so well. And she's service oriented, and this idea for this business was hers. And my dad kind of supported her, after years of her following him around the country and doing things that he wanted to do, which definitely was out of the box. I think when she decided she wanted to do this and they went full in, he pulled out his retirement that he had with his, with his union, and with a couple of other investments from some family friends, they started the business, and took a huge risk at doing that. And, my mom, she was an expert in the field, and truly visionary. I mean, she has a reputation, not only in our state, but on a national level of the things she's accomplished and the impact she had in this industry early on. So, both of them definitely played a strong role in not only my life, but in so many others. I mean, they made a positive impact in people's lives, everywhere they went.
What about other influencers? Was there, any grandparents on the scene, any favorite coaches or teachers that made a difference for you, Vince?
Yeah, I think early on, I was thinking about this a little bit, kind of put my thoughts together as an interview, and one of the things that I kind of forget about that really had a huge impact early on was my uncle. And he was actually my dad's uncle, so he's my great uncle. And he lived in Phoenix. He was a school teacher, and he was buying properties. and he would buy these properties. He'd work on them in the summer times and fix them up and get them ready. And he created a huge business of, just a real estate portfolio of rental properties. And
Mm.
he told me about that. And I did that early on. I mean, I started doing that when I think I bought my first property when I was 22. And I still own that property, as a matter of fact. I have dozens of properties now. And really, he was the one that influenced me for that. And I can remember sitting around when he come to visit with his kids were, you know, my age. So we had a lot in common. We spent a lot of time together. And I can remember sitting around and listen to him and my dad talk these harebrained ideas of how they were going to do some sort of business or, their next, whatever that thing was. And usually it was just a lot of brainstorming and them sitting around talking about these things. But, that definitely inspired myself and my cousin, to this day. He's a colonel in the Army, but he does the same thing. And we both have built a pretty large real estate portfolio. And I think my uncle, I haven't told him that probably enough, but he was a strong influencer there, and I'm glad he did it because I probably wouldn't have taken a lot of the risk I did if it wasn't for listening to him and the things that he had inspired me to do.
Real estate can be one of some of the best ongoing subscription, quote unquote, income that you can generate.
Yeah, and I have a 22-year-old son now, and he's wanting to get into real estate and do the same thing. He's actually
Yeah.
graduating on December 10th with his master's in global business management, and but he is on fire to buy his first property, and he's watched me do it, and he's got some great ideas and he's learning, and it has been really good to me. It was something that I could get into back. It was a lot easier, in the early 1900s and going into the 2000s up until 2008. But, you know, it, those are things that I think a lot of people, they think about wanting to get involved in real estate, but they don't quite understand how to do it
Yeah.
and why they need to do it. But people are always going to need somewhere to live, and if you do it right and you create high quality properties that people are going to want to be in and take care of your renters and put out a good product like anything else,
Yeah.
is definitely a blessing for not only the people who own the properties, but I think you can bless people who are living there and rent from you as well, and
Right.
that feels good.
Residual income and the appreciation, which is a great combination.
Absolutely.
Interestingly, my father and his brother, my uncle, got into the same business growing up. And I think when my dad retired about the same year I started working, he was earning about $25,000 a year, but ended up, growing these properties that were purchased for 10, 12 grand to now today are probably worth $1 million to $2 million. So,
Well,
that's
they
really something.
definitely did it a little bit better than I did, I think. But I know that when we got into it, I look back and I had over $1 million worth of properties before I was 40, and
Wow. That's
to be
awesome.
able to do that, and then when you start paying those things off and you start seeing the payoff down the line, it just happens exponentially,
Feels
and it
good.
makes your life so
Yeah.
much easier. It's worth the sacrifice when that happens, for
Yeah.
sure.
So that sounds like a pretty good entrepreneurial experience that you had early on. Any other entrepreneurial things you did before you got into hospice?
Yeah, so my background, when I went to college, but I really didn't know what I was going to do. Didn't have a clue. In fact, when I graduated high school, um, I don't think anybody really talked to me about that. I didn't have money. My family didn't have money. I really didn't know how to, no one, even our counselors at school hadn't really talked to me about, hey, you can borrow money, which thank God I didn't. I think that's one of the things that I really think is one of the worst forms of debt, out there. But
Yeah.
um,
That and
so
student loans, I think.
yeah, exactly. Student loans for sure. And so I moved back to Farmington and went to the community college here, which turned out to be a huge blessing as well. And I think a lot of the opportunities I had in my life were because I came to a town where it was easy to stand out. And
Mm.
I ended up going to school way longer than I should have, because I was just interested in so many different things. I took every class imaginable. I think it took me 3 or 4 years to get an associate's degree. But I got into the fire service, and
Yeah.
and prior to the fire service, I was working in outdoor recreation as a raft guide and a rock climbing instructor. And I got in the fire service, and I was able to blend those two kind of industries. And I started my business, Arroyo Rescue and Recreational Training, in 1997. And that grew to a business where, today we have clients all around the world, work with governments, military, police departments, fire departments, industrial teams. And, it all kind of started with my love for water rescue and, because I was working as a raft guide and because I was working with, rock climbing, we were doing rope rescue, and it transitioned really well. And I had some real life experience. And then going in the fire service, I got some real life experience there. Eventually, went, as part of a FEMA urban search and rescue team. There was 28 teams in the United States, and I was eventually the highest deployable rank on that team for New Mexico, and went to, like Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Rita, some different large disasters, and got to just build this skill set. And that business was definitely, even though I had a passion for real estate, and I still do, I really enjoy that. And I love that. Um, you know, it was unique, and there wasn't a whole lot of people doing it. And it was something that, even though I was doing it in my community, and people would say, well, there was not a big calling for people needing those skills. You got one police department, one fire department, but you got to think out larger than that. And next thing you know, I was, had a reputation to be able to work with other countries and other, languages and things of that. And that was probably my, still to this day, my baby. And I still love it, even though I don't do nearly as much with that because I have so much responsibility in this new role. But those were the big ones. And, when I was a kid, I was thinking about this too. When did this all start? I can remember making nunchucks. I'd go buy dowels and chains, and I'd make these nunchucks. I'd spray paint them, and I'd sell them at school until I got in trouble. Back in that day, I think it was a little less controversial, but I still think I got in trouble. And I remember making lollipops at home, buying the molds and the syrup and all that stuff, and selling those at school. So I always knew and thought that I was going to do something along those lines. And working with the fire department, I had that time and the energy to want to do something bigger and to expand. And so property and rescue training was just fit that niche.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that progression, because it's very interesting. And I spoke about this when we spoke a month or so ago as we prepared for the podcast. You started in the fire department, became battalion chief, had increasing levels of responsibility at the state and national, international level, got into rescue, and then hospice. And they're related, but they're very different. So can you tell us a little bit about those transitions and, what were some of the thoughts that you went through as you went from one of those, industries and sectors to the next?
Yeah. And I always look back at this and I think, trying to connect the dots, and it makes sense now, but back then, you're like, how did that work? And I definitely, think that there were some things that were definitely related to service. Everything I did, everything I wanted to do was service related.
That's a common thread, isn't it?
Yes. And I think it's an important thing that people need to have something bigger themselves in their lives. And when I was retired from the fire service, and I was basically working full time, teaching, traveling, and in a lot of regards, I was living the dream, right? I was going to places that I never thought I'd be able to go, to countries, working in, I remember the first time I went to Dubai to do some work, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this. And I ended up volunteering for an organization called Team Rubicon. It was a disaster relief organization that takes veterans and help reintegrate them into civilian life through continued service. And I miss the camaraderie of the fire service and the response aspect. And it gave me that, and it kind of gave me that sense of value and worth again. And eventually, as I started volunteering with them after a few disasters, they offered me a job, and I worked as a director of field operations for them. So I was responsible for all our volunteers going out and doing the actual work in the field. And then I created a program which was all about training and mentoring new leaders to be able to run these disasters. I mean, there's not a whole lot of people that could take, 100 people, put them out in the middle of a disaster, make sure that you have transportation, you can feed them, you can house them, you're tracking your information that you need for the agencies you're working for in a way that they can use it for, for FEMA or whatever, the World Health Organization, whatever it might be, and really keep these people safe. I mean, there's so many different levels there. And I had a skill set there. And so we'd go out there and we'd mentor and train these leaders to be able to run these disasters, to create depth. And I think that in any organization, that's what you're looking for, right? You're trying to identify leaders, people with skill sets, and then you're trying to develop them and take them and create depth in your organization, and helping reduce liability as well. I think that's a huge part of that too, make sure that people are safe. So that was service oriented. I love that, and I still love that organization. I still volunteer for them. It's been a while since I've been out, but in 2016, my sister, who worked for my parents for over 20 years, unfortunately, she committed suicide, and she lost her life. And she was in the process of buying the businesses from my parents. And my dad came to me and said, "Hey, we have a lot of responsibility there, a lot of people depending on us, but we are struggling being there because, every time we go in, we think of your sister, we see your sister, we're grieving, we're mourning." And I did some soul searching there, and I said, is this something I really want to do? And of course, I love the challenge, something new, learning something new, trying something new. But I wanted to make sure that I did it right and for the right reasons. And then I looked at it, what we do in home health and hospice, and we have many different branches and different things, aspects of that, but it's all about service. We serve a population, a strong part of our population that we serve are people who cannot and will not ever get better. And we provide caregivers for them so that they can live independently in their homes. And we're creating jobs for people who probably live in areas where they couldn't work and wouldn't be able to find other work. And we give them a skill set, something that makes them feel more value and a sense of worth. And it's super rewarding. And so that was the tie there with service. And I try to keep that in mind. And speaking of that, one of the things with my sister, I really think, when she was dealing with her mental health issues and stresses in life, like we all do, she had really become detached from a lot of different things. And I saw where service in Team Rubicon, where a lot of people who had fought depression, post-traumatic stress, different aspects of their life, how they could, find value in life again through continued service. Mm-hmm. And so it's something I preach about all the time because I think there's a tremendous value in that. When people, struggle, find something bigger and better than yourself to give back.
Right. Feel bad, go to a children's hospital.
Absolutely.
Was it hard to make that transition from the rescue to home health? And all the good reasons for doing it and taking it over from your parents and so forth. But, you spent a lot of time in that industry.
It was hard. I mean, especially when I started looking at financing, I'll tell you that was a huge thing when you look at when I was thinking about numbers that I never really had it, imagined that I would be dealing with, before. And so that was overwhelming, and the risk that was involved there. But I miss response, but I can stay involved in that. I mean, luckily, I've created a system where if something happens, I go and get my fix up for adventure or service or whatever it is to be able to continue to do that. But, I just right now I find so much value in creating jobs. And I think that just, you look at the big picture and what you're doing there and the, people who are able to spend a career making a living and take care of their family and then retiring, through our business, that gives me a great sense of self-worth. And then, we're having a huge impact on the community, and I enjoy that as well. And we do that through other service and things that we're doing in our community. So, the transition's fine. And, sooner or later, something will change and I'll find another aspect of something that I want to do and need to do. And I'll pursue that. But right now, this is definitely something that I'm passionate about.
So at Basin Home Health, how many employees today? How many people do you serve, and what's your footprint?
So we're in 3 different counties in our area, and we're in northwest New Mexico. We have 700 employees
Wow.
approximately. And we're the largest private employer in the town I live in, where we're based out of. And then we have probably close to 800 clients or patients that we serve on a
Nice.
rotating basis. We do hospice, we do caregiving, we do therapy and nursing in people's homes. And they all have different aspects, but really our goal is to keep people at home and healthy for as long as
Yeah.
possible.
Are you
Nobody really.
growing the footprint, growing the business as well, or
We are.
pretty stable?
One of the things was really challenging. I didn't think this would happen this way, but COVID um, had a huge impact on us. You know, Here I thought, nobody's going to want to go to the hospital. No one's going to go to nursing homes and things like that. They're probably some of the most dangerous places to be. They want to stay home,
Right.
but they also did not necessarily want us in their home. And people were not going to the hospitals, which meant that they weren't getting refers. We weren't getting people referred to us
Right.
as they came out. So that had a big impact. So we are in a rebuilding stage right now, and I'm actually enjoying it. I did a podcast last week for home health and hospice, and we talked about that we're kind of sharpening the tip of our spear. We're finding ways to rebuild a strong foundation of just basic foundational skills to make sure that we are prepped for the next growth opportunity, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a great amount of opportunity. There's challenges. We cannot raise our prices. We are dealing with government payers
Right.
and insurance companies on everything we do. Most of those rates are set, but we do have some great opportunities moving forward in the future. And I have a growth mindset all the time, so I'm always planting seeds, and waiting for something to sprout and to grow up. So
So
um,
700 employees. Tell us about the time, Vince, when you first started managing people, and what were some of the challenges you had back then? I assume it's back in the fire department days, correct?
well, I
Or even
did.
before that?
When I ran an outdoor program at a college for a while here
Mm,
locally, and it was my first. And I was a young. I think I was in my early 20s, having some employees there, just a couple, but it was a good opportunity to really learn some skills. I was lucky to have some good mentors. But going in the fire service, I when I became a captain, I was the youngest captain ever promoted in the history of our department. That has since been beat. Someone younger promoted after me, and then when I became a battalion chief, I was the youngest captain or youngest battalion chief as well. That brought some real challenges. I
mm,
was telling a story at a presentation I did not long ago, and I said, your ego is kind of like, okay, people are going to be excited to work for me. I scored number one on the test. I'm young. I'm excited. But what I forgot to realize is that the people that are working for me are people who also took that test
yeah.
and have been, trying to promote and trying to move up through the ranks as well. So I got
And
to.
probably some that have been there years, if not decades ahead of you too.
Exactly.
Been
And
there.
so, yeah, it gave me a lot of opportunity to grow there and to learn and really, my philosophy very early on was, I've got to look at people and their experiences. I mean, it'd be so naive of me to believe that I know more than those people with decades of experience, even though I was the one that promoted. Um, and so, how I handled those people and how I was able to engage them and create a team was a really great learning opportunity and experience. Um, and that probably was the best experience ever to move on into greater things. And I can remember, in Hurricane Katrina, when we went out, I was working we had 100 people out there doing rescue. We were one of the first urban search and rescue teams out there. And because I had a background in water rescue, which, by the way, had really nothing to do with floods,
Mm,
and it gave me experience that really made me a better instructor and a better leader too. But I was able to move up through the ranks through that experience by making sure that I, took those leadership experiences and handled them with humility
mm.
and with the right, you know, perspective to be successful. And eventually, you know, once again, as I got more responsibility and managing more people, and you just learn more. And sometimes it happens real quickly, and for others it might take decades. Um, I will say that I think you've got to put yourself out there. If there's new leaders and they're thinking, you got to look for opportunities to challenge yourself, because no growth is ever going to happen in your comfort zone. And thankfully, I enjoy chaos, and I feel like I thrive in chaos. Not everybody can do that, but those are opportunities for growth for me. And I really look at change and any opportunity to challenge myself as, okay, this is a growth opportunity, not I'm prepared, I'm ready, I'm going to just rock this. I look at it more as, this is an opportunity for me to learn, and if I approach this correctly, utilize the resources I have, which is usually your people and your team, treat them appropriately, and be able to use their skill sets, which in many times are greater than your own. You can be successful and you can come out of that. And even sometimes when it hurts and you learn some hard lessons and maybe things didn't go the way you wanted to, you've got to grab that lesson. You're missing an opportunity if you don't.
Right. How would you say your leadership style has kind of really evolved over time in the current role versus kind of where you started back in those small teams?
Well, I definitely think that, there's a strong service-based leadership. Robert Greenleaf wrote on service leadership, and I became a student of that really early on. And I think that's a big, big part. And I think relationships is the other. And you can tie the two together and you can say, okay, there's something called followership. And I think a lot of people misunderstand that term. And so part of being a good leader is knowing when to lead and when to follow.
Yeah.
And and there's a lot of times you may have the official title of leader for the organization, but it's more appropriate for you to put someone else in a role because of their expertise and their knowledge. And if you do that correctly, and even and we've all worked for bad bosses. I think I've learned as much from a bad boss as I learned from a good boss, but
if not more sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. But part of the ethics and morality of that is, you need to go out there and you need to help that person be successful. And if you disagree, you should be able to find a way to address that, identify it, talk about it. But in the end, when the commander's intent goes out, and I'm sure there's other terms for that, it's our role and our responsibility to make sure that we follow that. If it's illegal, unethical, or dangerous, those are the exceptions to that.
Yeah.
But I think, ego plays a powerful role too. And we've got to check our ego in both a leadership role and a follower role, and know when it's appropriate. And if you can be a good follower, you can be a good leader. And I think that's a really important thing. And if you do it right, if the roles were reversed and you treat those people right as a leader, they're going to treat you right when they become a leader.
Amen. Beyond kind of the basic qualifications for a job, what do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in and hire at Basin?
Personality absolutely is the number one thing. I tell our staff all the time when we interview that we want to hire personalities. We can teach somebody to do the job.
Yeah.
But you can't always teach somebody to be a good person.
Right.
And that goes so far as attitude, positive attitudes, optimism. A lot of people, I think people who are optimistic sometimes get a bad rap in certain circles, and people feel like it's fake or whatever. But man, it is so much better than the alternative, which is negativity.
Yeah.
And so we really thrive because I think we try to put the right people in the seat. And we've made mistakes, and it's kind of funny because I don't micromanage our hiring process. I set some guidance, and we get people out there, and we'll give some people a shot, and turns out to be the wrong person, or you can tell that we made a mistake in that realm, and that's a great learning experience for the people who had those people work for them or work with them. And so, ethics are important, integrity, all those types of things. But I think that when it comes down to it, the happy, positive, optimistic people are usually, follow that the majority of the time. It's not always true. I know there's people out there that are chameleons for sure, but
Yeah.
we've been lucky with that so far, and it's worked well, through, the majority of my life.
Awesome. Vince, we're just about out of time, and we've got one last question we always ask. And I'm going to give it a little bit of a different spin today because of, your history and kind of the interesting and somewhat tragic way you had to obviously, commit to the family business. So the question is, what kind of career and life advice would you give to someone maybe who has their eyes on a corner office, but it's a family business, and maybe they had some, reservations about doing so, and but maybe life circumstances, not unlike your own, kind of force them into it. I know I've got a couple of kids that I'd love to take over my business someday. Neither of them are showing any interest, so I'm kind of sitting in this going, hey, how do I go down that road? But what would you say to someone like that who has that type of an opportunity to either go into a family business or buy one, or gets potentially inserted into one as you did?
Well, that's an interesting question. I can tell you that my dad, when I retired from the fire department, he asked me if I want to get involved with the family business,
Yeah.
and I told him absolutely not.
I remember you telling me that a month or
Yeah,
so ago.
yeah, I did. I said no, I do not want to, and a lot of it's because I saw the dynamics between my parents and my sister, and the
Yeah,
strains
yeah,
sometimes it put on the relationship and stuff like that. Now that being said, when I came in, I had to think about that, and I said, I want to have the I want to have control. That being said, I need you for your expertise, your knowledge, but I want to be the final say in decisions. Um, and and I think everybody probably has a different perspective of that, and I think a different level of, do I let go of that control, or is this person going to be able to really do things the way they want to? But one, I think my parents knew my personality. I think that's a big thing, is you've got to want to do it for the right reasons. If you're doing it because you want to be in charge and it's an ego thing, or because you're just chasing dollars or something like that, those are not the right reasons.
yeah.
You got to be out there because you want to make a difference, and really you want to take care of your people. And that being said, I have a daughter who's working for me now, and she's moved into an administrative role, and we have a great working relationship, and she's doing amazing, and she's well respected. But there's a challenge there because a lot of times the employees might look at that and say, well, the nepotism,
Right.
you're just hiring this person because
Preferential
you're a family
treatment.
member. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if she didn't have the skill sets and she wasn't able to do the things that she's been able to do, she wouldn't be successful. And she is killing it. And then my son has asked me if there's an opportunity for him to get involved in the business, and I've told him no. And the
Mm.
reason is that kid is capable of so many amazing things. I'm so proud of him, and I know he's going to be a success. But I don't want him to have, because this is a stressful business. And with my daughter, she was a nurse. My
Yeah.
son has this entrepreneur spirit like I did, and I know he's going to go on. He's going to do great things, and I'm going to support him in those things because there's a lot of risk sometimes involved. So I think it takes a really good clarity from everybody involved to look at that, and what your skill sets and what you have to offer and what your real intentions are about wanting to do something like that. And I know if my son got involved, he would learn it. He would be successful. He'd do a great job. But I also know that there's a lot of risk and liability in this industry, and I think that he's going to have probably a lot more joy in doing something that he's creating on his own, and finding his way. And he may make his way back to me. I'm not sure what that is, but right now I want to support him in those other things. But I will tell you, there's 5 things that I tell those kids that are super important. I'll tell you, everybody, regardless whether it's a family business or you're going your own. One is relationships are important. It's the most important thing. Everybody you come across is someone who's a potential customer, a potential boss, and a potential employee, someone you might do business with, and you've got to mentor those things. Networking is such an important thing. You've got to find mentors, and mentors, and you've got to be willing to mentor others when you get to that realm. You've got to make sure you take care of yourself as a primary thing, and with that, your physical fitness, your mental health, your emotional health, and we forget about that sometimes we get involved. And you got to check your ego,
Mm.
and you got to make sure you're doing things for the right reasons. And there's always someone out there smarter and better. But if you can tie those things into it, if you're getting involved in a family business, really do that soul searching and figuring out the way it makes it work. And I think make it your own. And I've seen where other individuals with similar opportunities have been successful, and there's been failures as well. But, I wouldn't necessarily tell people just jump into a family business just because, your family enjoyed it. You got to do what you want to. You got to be passionate about whatever you're doing and find your why. If you can find your why and you can connect those, then it's great. And, if not, there's so many opportunities. And for me, I want my kids to be more successful than I am. I want them to do more. And, to me, that's my legacy. My legacy is not this business, it's my kids. When it's all said and done, when I leave, people are going to forget the things I did in the fire service, in, urban search rescue and rescue. And I've had a tremendous amount of impact there. But my kids and my grandkid, now I have a grandson as well, that's our true legacy. And I want them to find their why and to be able to be successful in life.
Basin Home Health and Hospice is a state-certified Medicare and Medicaid home health agency that provides professional services to over 800 clients in northern New Mexico. Vince Moffitt is their CEO. Thank you so much, Vince, for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thank you, Brett. It's really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.